Good morning. Our lesson today, June 27th, is again a part of the Joseph story. Uh, we'll pick up toward the end of that story. Years ago, a Methodist circuit minister was accompanied by his son as they entered a small church in a remote area of the state. Just inside the door was a table with a small basket for offerings on its top. The minister handed his son a couple of dollars to put in the basket, and then they went inside where a congregation of 5 people awaited them. After delivering his sermon, the minister and his son were speaking with the people when one of the elder members came forward with the basket in his hand. He explained to the minister that there wasn't much money to offer him, but this offering had been a little better than usual. He then gave him the contents of the basket, $2.30. As they were riding away, the boy pointed out to his father, "You know, if we had put more into it, we would have gotten more out of it." Maybe at times, we think our church is not doing anything for us. We just don't seem to be connecting with the other members, and everyone seems to be just going through the motions. Sometimes we attend until our children grow up, and then without that motivation, we just drop in occasionally or stop attending altogether. And this doesn't just happen with adults. Sometimes youth who have contributed so much with their enthusiasm, participation in the services, and allowing their talents to shine, begin to feel that the church is not giving enough back in return. So they find other ways to spend their Sundays, and the church becomes only a childhood memory. The truth is that there are times when each of us may share these feelings, but it's not because God has distanced himself from us. It's because we've pulled away from him. You know, if we put more into it, we get more out of it. Today, we're going to explore what John Wesley would probably have classified as sanctifying grace, a time in a believer's life when she or he is seeking to love more like Christ, a time when faith enables the person to truly be led by the hand of God. Joseph spent over 20 years away from his family, away from brothers who beat him and sold him into slavery, away from a father who thought him to be dead, away from people who shared the religion of his youth. In the interim, God had been with him as he performed the duties of a servant in Pharaoh's household, as he was cast into prison and ministered to fellow prisoners, and as he was elevated to being second in command of all of the Egyptian empire. Joseph had learned what it was truly like to distance himself from selfishness and to find purpose in serving others. Now it was time for the ultimate test, a test of forgiveness. I want to read Genesis 45th chapter, verses 1 through 15. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there's been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will not be plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't delay. You shall live in the region of Goshen and be near me, you, your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, all you have. I will provide for you there because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute. You can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that it is really I who am speaking to you. Tell my father all about the honor accorded me in Egypt and about everything you have seen, and bring my father down here quickly. Then he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin embraced him, weeping, and he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterward, his brothers talked with him. Today's lesson jumps ahead 3 chapters from that of last Sunday, when Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream, was released from prison, and was entrusted for preparing Egypt for the years of famine. But first, he oversaw a plan to store the abundant grain and food during 7 years of plenty. Second in command to Pharaoh, he could have merely delegated responsibilities, but he traveled the kingdom, learning to appreciate the people and showing them what a truly caring person could accomplish for a greater good. When the famine strikes, Egypt is prepared and has not only accumulated enough resources to sustain its people, but also has enough to assist neighboring countries. Canaan and the Hebron Valley of Joseph's childhood was desperate. And his 10 older brothers now came to Egypt to purchase grain. They did not recognize Joseph because of his physical transformation, his language, his manner of dress, and of course, his status. He did recognize them, however, and accused them of being spies. His interrogation made them reveal their family background, including the news that his father and youngest brother Benjamin were at home waiting for them. Joseph required one of the brothers, Simeon, to stay until they brought back their youngest brother to verify their statements. Jacob, however, delayed their return for fear of losing Benjamin. But the famine deepened, and desperate, the brothers returned, with Judah promising to be personally responsible for Benjamin. During the visit, the brothers were told to go to Joseph's home, where they were participants at a banquet meal. Simeon was brought out to join them, and then the brothers were each given a sack of grain to transport back to their home. En route, Egyptian men stopped the brothers, telling them that the silver wine goblet of their host had been stolen and that the thief would be executed. Joseph had instructed that the goblet be placed in the grain bag of Benjamin, and Judah quickly comes to his defense, offering to sacrifice himself because of the anguish that would be suffered by his father. This convinced Joseph of the change in his brothers, and he reveals himself to them, weeping as love for his family superseded the pain that had been inflicted on him years before. He had heard the reference to his father still being alive, but he had to have it verified again by the brothers, who were in shock that this could be Joseph. But he affirmed, "I am the brother you sold to Egypt." Then he offered forgiveness and shared with them that their actions, he now saw, was God's plan, a plan that presently included their opportunity to receive salvation from the further consequences the famine would bring to their land. In this way, Joseph had become the lifeline for his people to survive. God's plan. He then sent his brothers back to bring his father the entire family, and all their flocks and herds to Goshen, where they could live under his protection. While there may have been some doubt in the brothers' minds, it was Benjamin who helped dispel the uncertainty. He and Joseph hugged one another and wept. The meeting had evolved into a family reunion. Joseph then embraced each of them, and tears of joy and forgiveness enabled them to reunite. News of this meeting reached Pharaoh before the departure of the brothers, and he asked Joseph, since he did not speak Hebrew, to tell Joseph's extended family that they had royal authorization to come and reside in Egypt. A small favor for the man who had saved his empire from catastrophe. Joseph's father heard the news, and his heart nearly failed when he was told that Joseph was still alive. But he recovered and was more than willing to risk the move because all he wanted was to see Joseph before he died. God's grace was there, even in the most trying circumstances, even when there had been dissension and jealousy within a family, false accusations, hardships, servitude, and even imprisonment. God lifted up Joseph and enabled him to encourage others to accept God's grace in their lives. A nation that had seemed heartless and cruel enabled other nations to survive because one man revealed the innate kindness and love that God offers to each person. One recent evening, my wife and I were invited by some friends to stop by their house to watch the primroses open up. I'd heard that the flower buds would suddenly begin to move and twist as darkness began to settle and close in after a bright day of warm sunshine. But I'd never seen the event take place. It was remarkable to see the flowers begin to pop open. In 30 or 40 seconds, a tight bud would be replaced by a beautiful, full yellow blossom. Their bright fragrance enhanced the display, and the willowy stalks danced and swayed in the gentle breeze as the flowers reflected the quiet rhythm of a beautiful summer evening. Even in the darkness, there's beauty to be found. We simply have to allow our eyes to see, our hands to reach out, our voices to be heard, our talents to be shared as we open our hearts to God. We must remember that church, even Inman United Methodist Church, is not the building. It's not a service where a sermon is presented. It's not a place to occupy a pew. We are the church. Wherever we are, whatever we do, whoever we meet, we are the church. Nothing could be more heartbreaking than hearing someone say, "I'm getting nothing from my church. I'm finding the church to be dull and lifeless. I have given up on the church." What if that had been Joseph's response, even after he was persecuted, enslaved, and imprisoned? It may be in darkness or despair that we need to reach out, to find fulfillment by helping others, to rediscover God's presence in our lives. Let's make this time of transition at Inman UMC a time to really look at the church that each of us can be. Folks, it's been a privilege over a number of months now to do this online lesson. Now that we're back to in-person Bible study opportunities, perhaps it's time to reconnect on Sunday mornings. If you're not comfortable in one of the existing classes, we'll try to work something out. Please join me as we prepare for a new beginning. May we pray. Dear God, thank you for being our light, even when things seem dark. Help us to share that light and to be your church. Amen.